This episode explores anxiety and why it shows up differently in autism. What are the biological drivers and hacks to lower anxiety for kids with autism as well as adults that are living with autism, but also the caregivers that support them, their parents, grandparents, aides. I'll share my experiences with Jimmy, but I'll also share my experiences for myself. I'm always testing, by the way, new modalities, new treatments, new protocols, but I'm hoping that today you'll walk away with a few things. Number one is a deeper or maybe a different understanding of what the root causes are of anxiety for people with autism, and a practical protocol list and tools that you can implement today. um, so why are we doing a full episode on anxiety? It does deserve its own episode because anxiety is often the most significant roadblock for people with autism. It impacts social life, independent living, learning, and especially health. I'll try and put as much as possible in the show notes, including some research sources and the products that I'm using right now, most of them at least. So let's get started. So this episode will cover anxiety and autism, the types of anxiety, um, the non-behavioral or biological root causes of anxiety. I'll also tell you a little more about Jimmy's triggers and my story, my caregiver anxiety story. I'm hoping you'll have a full toolkit of at least what I'm using right now and what's worked for me, and solutions that you could apply for your own anxiety story, for yourself, your child, or your family. Now, let's start with Jimmy's story. And what does anxiety look like for someone with autism? Obviously, everybody's different, and people with autism are all different. But anxiety in someone with autism is not typical anxiety, right? It's a lot of times far more severe. It's paralyzing, it's overwhelming, and it's very invisible. And when I say invisible, I mean that you won't see it in the media, in shows or movies or even documentaries. The episodes are often so severe that I couldn't even take a video so I could show it to Jimmy's doctors, because when I'm talking to his doctors, I tell them that he has anxiety, and I feel that the word is too weak and not descriptive enough. I wish that I could show you what it looks like, but frankly, whenever we encounter an episode of extreme anxiety, we're a little bit paralyzed. I tried to video record it, but I haven't been able to do it. He's 21 years old. So I'm hoping that me describing it verbally will give you a little bit of an idea. And again, it's going to be different for everybody. But in Jimmy's case, he goes into very obsessive loops. And I guess it's a way for him to self soothe. And so he repeats, his thoughts become very repetitive, and he repeats the same questions and the same thoughts and the same sentences. His body becomes very, very tense, very tense. You can see his legs and his calf muscles so hard because his whole body is completely tense. And when he reaches the height of his anxiety, his hands will shake. He'll sometimes scream and self harm. He slams his whole body on the ground. and he's 21 years old now. So he's older, and he's a young man. So that's basically self-harming, because it will hurt his body when he does that. Some kids and adults end up reacting by having really intense seizures. Some of them even elope, which is extremely dangerous. And you can only imagine what it looks like for someone that doesn't know what's happening, and having an individual with autism going through all of these reactions in a public place. It's extremely scary and gut wrenching, and really, really bad. So I'm hoping that this gives you a little idea of what it looks like. And a big goal of this episode is to understand that what I'm talking about is not a behavioral issue, it's physiological. What I mean by that is that people doing this are not doing it for attention, and it cannot be solved by traditional behavioral therapy or ABA. It's very important to start here at this level of understanding of anxiety, and then we can start improving everything else. So, and I'll explain that a little bit more further, but it's very hard to treat anything else before we treat the anxiety, because it is a roadblock. It is so intense and paralyzing that it's very hard to keep progressing on making the person's health better, learning better, understanding better, inclusion better. So before we go a little bit deeper into Jimmy's story, I'm going to tell you my story, Jimmy's caregiver, his mom. And that will give you an idea of what is probably happening to our kids. So I feel like I'm a pretty calm person. I've even tested my neurotransmitters. Everything looks great. I've had an EKG done many times and it looks perfect. But about a year ago, my devices, all of them, Aura, my Whoop, my 8 Sleep, were all sending me alerts constantly saying that my heart rate was way too high. My heart rate would be sometimes in the 120s or even higher while I was lying down or trying to go to sleep. So once that alert became more constant for a week or two, I shouldn't have waited that long, but it finally got my attention. So I went to see my cardiologist, and she did another EKG, and she said, it's absolutely perfect. Everything looks great. But I showed her the data from my wearables. And when she saw that, she finally thought, okay, there might be something wrong, but maybe these wearables are not very reliable. So she had me wear a Holter, it's called the Zeo patch, for 2 weeks. And once she received the results, she didn't even see me. She sent me in a panic to an electrophysiologist. So that's a cardiologist that specializes in things like pacemakers, but also a surgery called cardiac ablation therapy. When I went to see this electrophysiologist, this specialist in cardiology, he gave me a diagnosis of IST, which is inappropriate sinus tachycardia. So typically the standard treatment for something like this are beta blockers or the surgery, other medications too, also, of course, but surgery, which is the cardiac ablation therapy. So, on his advice, we decided to take a few months to try some lifestyle changes that could help, like nervous system regulation first, and lifestyle such as zone 2 exercise and drinking more water, etc. So when I left his office, I went deep into a lot of research, and I found additional supplements um, that could help. And that's when I also discovered something called nervous system retraining. So the supplements that I added were electrolytes, which is crazy because I wasn't drinking, I wasn't taking electrolytes. And now, whenever I drink water, I always add electrolytes. I also started taking taurine and glycine, and I added zone 2 exercise to my weightlifting regimen. But I also did a ton of research on the vagus nerve, which is what the surgery, by the way, um, ablates or cuts. So I learned about vagal toning and brain retraining. And I learned that there are two ways of doing it. So the regular way, the main way is vagal toning and limbic system retraining exercises. So things that I would do. And for that, I researched a lot of programs, and there's a few of them. The main three are the DNRS program, the Gupta program, and the Primal Trust. And I decided to go with Primal Trust for many reasons. And at some point, we'll have another episode that just talks about Primal Trust. It's an amazing program. It's basically a self-paced program with videos, and there's also live classes. And then you come out of it with a toolkit and a regimen to help you retrain your nervous system. And it all starts by understanding intellectually what it is, what's a sympathetic, parasympathetic system, what's fight or flight, what's the vagus nerve, and all of that. Because once you understand it with your intellect, with your brain, it does impact the autonomous nervous system, which is what's regulating your heart rate, your digestion, and a lot of other things. But understanding this intellectually helps calibrate it, basically. So these were the exercises that I did myself, but I also found gadgets, which I love gadgets. So there's a lot of vagus nerve stimulating devices. So I found Sense.ai, BrainTap, which is more for neurofeedback, and the Apollo Neuro, which is a vibrating device that you wear on your wrist. And I tested all of these. As you know, I love looking at data. And for all of these, especially the Apollo Neuro, for example, because my heart rate was going really high at night, I would wear it on my wrist and let it run all night while I was sleeping. And I saw that my heart rate would go down finally. It was amazing. So after 6 months of doing all of this, my HRV went from the single digits. It literally used to be 5 or 6 to the 30s. And now I'm happy to say that I'm finally reaching the 50s for my HRV. And my heart rate, which best case scenario was in the 80s, is now in the 60s, which is unbelievable. That's how it should be. So the data is showing that it was working. I didn't need to take any medication or surgery. So why does this matter? Because the caregivers also get dysregulated. We're having to deal with very difficult responsibilities and situations. And that's not just for caregivers for autism. It's my mother is caring for my father right now, and he has Alzheimer's, and I see a lot of similarities there. So I think that caregivers have to take care of their own nervous system and themselves in general, but definitely their nervous system. So now let's talk about what anxiety looks like in autism. So many people with autism, whether they're verbal or nonverbal, find it very difficult to describe internal sensations. I was able to get the information from a few people with autism, and they would describe it as a soda can that was shaken and that needs to explode. Um, a lot of people with autism and kids cannot identify pain or discomfort. I've had many doctors ask me if it was in pain, if Jimmy was in pain, if he had a headache, or if he was nauseous or dizzy. And unfortunately, he is verbal now. He didn't used to be verbal, but he still cannot explain it. And I don't know if it's because he doesn't, um, if he feels it differently, or if he just doesn't have the language to explain it. A lot of people also on the spectrum cannot label emotions, and maybe sometimes what looks like anger is actually feeling frustration or defeat or extreme sadness. So anxiety can show up as avoidance or shutdown, sometimes aggression or self-injury, or obsessive thoughts and habits or tics. So these are physiological reactions. They're not behavioral problems. They're not defiance, and definitely not tantrums. So treating them by rewarding good behavior. So basically rewarding them if they don't complain and sit nicely, or if they don't react to these horrible feelings, or ignoring literal cries for help that are considered negative behavior, is frankly cruel. And there is a place for ABA. And I'm hoping that just hearing this will help people just reframe anxiety. So now let's talk about different physiological anxiety for people with autism. They can be, again, triggered by internal sensations such as pain, nausea, headaches, dizziness, but even heart rate changes. Again, Jimmy now is wearing an Apple Watch, so I'm able to see his heart rate change. And in a lot of times, changes before his anxiety episode. And a lot of times I see his watch turning red because it thinks he's working out. And then the big anxiety comes later. A lot of times it's an MCAS reaction, mast cell activation syndrome, which again, we'll have a separate episode just about this, but it could be an allergic reaction. And it's been shown that MCAS reactions a lot of times can be neurologically felt, basically. A lot of times it can be gut inflammation and pain in their GI. And a lot of times also, by the way, it's a sensory anxiety and like an overload, social, but also sound, light, smells, and a lot of times even textures. It just puts them in a fight or flight sensory threat kind of situation, which is why you see those behaviors. And sometimes it can also be looping thoughts, and it could start as just a way to soothe yourself, but it ends up being a loop that just kind of feeds on itself, and it's very, very difficult. Or it could become an obsession where um, things can only be done in a certain way, and that's impossible most of the time, and makes it very hard. A lot of times it's fear of unpredictability, which goes back to that fight or flight situation. If you are feeling that you're under attack and what's around you is unpredictable, it's very scary. um, and and a lot of times when we're in this state, it's very hard to shift mental states from this feeling of being unsafe to a state where you have to learn or do math or analyze a paragraph. So the autonomous nervous system anxiety is what I mentioned a little bit there, but a lot of times the nervous system is stuck in sympathetic state. which is fight or flight, which is probably what also happened to me. Although on the outside, I looked completely cool as a cucumber, my nervous system was in constant alert and fight or flight. So when that happens, a lot of times the data that you will see is a very low HRV and a high heart rate, which is why it's important to measure things as much as possible. And so Primal Trust, the program, talks about this a lot, and we'll dive deeper into this in a separate episode. But I encourage you to do some research on this whole field of nervous system retraining. It's amazing. It's made a huge difference for us. Now, anxiety can also be triggered by the environment, things like mold, chemicals, fragrances. And you hear stories of kids that are completely calm and doing great, and they would walk through the cleaning aisle in the grocery store and just completely have a meltdown. Well, those chemicals are very, very aggressive to someone who's sensitive. Same thing with non-natural fragrances. We had Jimmy a lot of times be also very calm, and then a person will walk in the room and he would completely have a meltdown and become very anxious. And we had to start asking all the people around him, his teachers, his aides, his family, to change the fragrances they were wearing. So we only wear natural fragrances that don't have toxic chemicals, toxic fragrances like phthalates and other synthetic chemicals in them. Same thing with the cleaning products. At least at home, we can control it. So we only use natural cleaning products. And now all of these are very available. Natural fragrances, natural makeup, natural cleaning products are very much available and easy to find. Another thing that's an environmental trigger are seasonal allergens. So what someone would react to with a stuffy nose and runny eyes, someone like Jimmy would react to with extreme anxiety. And again, I had to do so much research to find out that, yes, there's a huge relationship again with MCAS, which seasonal allergens would fall under that umbrella, with that type of allergy and reactivity and extreme anxiety. Now, we talked about it a little bit. So the biological root causes for this kind of anxiety, right? So I'm not talking about something happening in your environment or like a really sad or terrible event. Obviously, you will get anxious if someone is trying to harm you or if a tiger is trying to attack you. But what are the biological root causes of anxiety? Those are things like GI, gastrointestinal issues with your gut, okay, mast cell activation, allergies, or sensitivities to things like food. Like, for example, Jimmy is extremely sensitive to a number of foods, and I was not really aware of them until I isolated them. And this is me also inviting you to look into that because it's really life changing. And of course, it's different for each person. So I can tell you what it is for Jimmy and frankly for myself also. Here's an example: sugar. So, sugar specifically for Jimmy, and I'm talking all sugar, that includes honey, agave, but also fruits, a berry. His reaction is delayed, so he doesn't have an immediate reaction to it. But for weeks on end, usually at least 2 weeks after he's had that food with sugar, he becomes extremely anxious and it's completely out of control. It's very, very hard to manage. For me, the way I react to it, so I do have my version, I guess, of MCAS, is that if I have any sugar, same thing, even a fruit, I it's a delayed reaction, so it takes maybe a day, but then I'm extremely tired for weeks. I still have to do all the things that I do, but I'm very, very tired for a long time. And I used to think that that was an issue with my thyroid or lack of sleep. But once I removed it, it was unbelievable. The energy I had was crazy. Of course, I would love for me or for Jimmy to be able to have an apple, but right now we cannot. I'll figure it out hopefully at some point. But for now, I removed this food and it made a huge difference in our lives. And again, so for you or for your child or for your parent, it could be something completely different. People are allergic or reactive to completely different foods. Things like sometimes eggs or berries or citrus or even onions or anything, cocoa, nuts. So you would have to basically do your own investigation for yourself or for or the person you're caring for by isolating that food and removing it and potentially bringing it back at some point so you can see what it feels like. There's also chemical intolerance, and I talked about fragrances and perfumes before, mold and mycotoxins. Um, and we'll have a separate episode just because mold is such an important subject, but I'll just talk about it lightly here. Mold is not just a smell that's annoying or that's unpleasant. When there's mold present somewhere, there will be mold spores in the air that you will breathe in, and once they go in your body, they cause extreme issues that will look like something else, basically. And that's the issue with mold. That's why mold can be so dangerous and scary, frankly. And for a lot of people, the reaction is also extreme anxiety. And again, we'll go deeper in the subject in a separate episode, but I just want you to take note of that. And then there's histamine intolerance, right? And when I say histamine, most people will think of allergies and antihistamines. So yes, that's for environmental allergens, but it also impacts things like food. So there are high histamine foods, and some food will create a histamine reaction for some people, and some won't. So it's different for everyone, but it's definitely an important root cause, which I wanted to talk about. Blood sugar instability, really highs or really lows, going from one to the other, can cause also extreme anxiety, which is why it's important to measure that. And now it's much easier with the constant glucose monitors that can be available to even people without diabetes. I also encourage you to try it out for a couple weeks and see what it looks like. I think it will give you a lot of insight. Now, another root cause can be, of course, sleep deprivation. Everybody knows that. Everybody's more grouchy and um, more annoyed with a bad night of sleep. But again, for very sensitive patients, people with autism, it can look like extreme anxiety. And something that I've looked into for Jimmy specifically this year, but I'm starting to work on it for myself also, are hormonal imbalances. So on two ends, right? So of course you have the sex hormones, which it's very important to test them. A lot of individuals with autism have very imbalanced hormones. So balancing that with hormone replacement therapy, or at least being aware of it, sometimes with herbs, can help balance that. And again, we'll have a separate episode just to talk about that. But also the thyroid, right? And it's interesting. I always ask the moms of kids with autism, and a lot of them have this condition called Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune hypothyroid syndrome. And basically, for Hashimoto's, the thyroid is slower, doesn't work as well, but also there's an autoimmune issue where the body is attacking the thyroid. That can be also tested. So, again, I encourage you to test that. And when you test your thyroid, it's important to test your whole thyroid panel, but to also check antibodies, because in Jimmy's case, we figured out, thanks to our MCAS doctor, Dr. McCann, was amazing at pinpointing the issue. And we realized that he has Graves' disease, and Graves' disease is the opposite of Hashimoto's. It's also an autoimmune condition where the body is attacking the thyroid, but the thyroid is hyperactive. And what are the symptoms of a hyperactive thyroid? Well, it's higher heart rate, faster heart rate, anxiety. These are the first two issues with Graves or hyperthyroidism. So we've been working on that, and that's been fantastic in helping modulate his thyroid function. And later, we saw an effect on his anxiety. A lot of times also, there's a mitochondrial issue that impacts anxiety. And a lot of times, people with autism have issues with mitochondrial dysfunction, which is the little battery that's in all of your cells, and it impacts your energy levels. And if there's dysfunction there, it's very hard to find the energy to do a lot of basic things. And that in turn could turn into anxiety. Another one that's more general, but I'll just note it here. And again, we'll dive deeper in another episode, is nutrient deficiencies. So lacking some minerals or some vitamins or also some lipids um, that are essential for the brain or for the body's functioning can be also a root cause for anxiety. And in general, just like I talked before about nervous system reprogramming or regulation, so the autonomic nervous system, once it's dysregulated, the result will be extreme anxiety. We talked about inflammation in the gut, but there's also inflammation in the brain. And in Jimmy's case, we've done PET scans with the Amen Clinic, and it was very clear as day, that his brain, frankly, is on fire. And when that happens, obviously, you will be anxious. So, working on that as well. And in general, one of the root causes can also be just as simple as pain or extreme discomfort that these kids cannot express. So, for Jimmy specifically, we talked about his triggers, and a huge trigger for him, again, was his mast cell activation syndrome, his MCAS, from seasonal allergies. And we figured that out before even seeing Dr. McCann, because he had the type of anxiety that looked like it was cyclical or would go away and come back out of the blue. And then we started correlating it with us having allergies, and we realized that, seasonal allergies were extremely impactful on his anxiety. So we started giving him antihistamines, and that helped a lot. I talked also about the fragrances and his reactions to certain people, and correlating that with synthetic fragrances that they were wearing. Same with foods. We talked about sugar, but also, by the way, cocoa is triggering a lot of his reactivity. So now that we've removed these foods and removed these chemical scents from not only the house, but the family and caregivers, he's getting much, much better. We saw a huge difference. Obviously, at some point, the goal would be for him to be able to navigate life, to navigate a grocery store or an environment where people are wearing these fragrances, or to be able to have a banana or an apple, but at this point where we are right now, removing these things from his environment have been the solution. And again, like I said, I'm working on getting there, but it's a process. It takes a while, and I just wanted to share these results with you. So hopefully you would be able to extrapolate that to your own environment. Now, a few more things that were kind of obvious at the beginning, but it took us a while to have systems around them, was the stress in the environment that really increased his sensitivity. And that brings me to the family nervous system's regulation in general. We realized that Jimmy's anxiety mirrored our nervous system. So if I was rushing into doing something or speaking with my husband, but very quickly, and we're both pretty type A, and so if the way we were talking was very intense, he would react to it every time. Every time. Or even sometimes, if I was feeling kind of rushed or anxious internally, even if I didn't express it, or even if it didn't show completely on the outside, he would feel it. So we unfortunately had to realize that the only way to deal with that specific root cause was to deal with our own anxiety and our own nervous systems, right? And to try to reduce stress around him. We had to build it into his schedule so we don't have to rush him, so we're not late, and we take ample time to get to appointments or to classes, but also by telling everybody around him to stay very calm. And frankly, a lot of times the way we choose his aids is by looking at their anxiety levels and the way they're able to handle very stressful situations. So now that we talked about the strategy in general and the understanding of the root causes, I'll tell you a little bit about what's in his toolkit. And again, this changes, and I'm sure it's going to change in the next few months. I'll probably add things, maybe remove things. And I've tried so many things, so much. And this is what I have right now. So I hope that this will be very helpful to you to look into as a toolkit. And what worked for Jimmy or what worked for me might not work for you, but at least now you have a number of tools that you could look into and try from. The magnolia bark extract has been unbelievable for him. And because it was so good for his anxiety, I found something called the DHHB, which is the magnolia bark extract. And I'll list in the show notes some of the ones that I really like that I've been using with him. Some adrenal support, and again, it's very different for each member of the family. We all use different ones. So I'll list a few, and the trick is to try a little bit of each one at a time, and you'll know when it's working because you'll feel amazing. And then same thing with your child, you will see a difference or not if it's not working. So taurine and glycine have been unbelievable also. And then there are some peptides that I've been researching for years, but I've introduced those this year. And again, we'll have a separate episode just about peptides. But oxytocin, which is known as the hormone of love, I've introduced that to him, and I love it. I really love it. We use it as a nasal spray. We've tried it orally also. Same thing. It works differently on different people, and also the modality affects different people differently, right? So for him, the nasal spray was fantastic, much better than the oral oxytocin. There's also another peptide called Selank, Selank, which has been unbelievable for him. And I've tried it in a nasal spray and I didn't see much of an effect. And now I give it to him subcutaneously, and that has been really amazing. There's also a serum from Quicksilver that I absolutely love. It's called the Peace Serum. And I love the fact that it's a serum, so it's transdermal. And that's a different path for all of these, supplements and herbs to get to his bloodstream. So that has been also very, very efficient for him. We've also introduced daily practices for vagal toning. So we've done also neurofeedback, but right now we're doing the Sense.ai daily, 5 days a week, and we take a little break on the weekend. But every day we're doing the Sense.ai, which help him work on his breathing, HRV training, but also biofeedback. And it's been unbelievable. And we'll have also a separate episode just about that, because it's definitely an amazing modality and something to look into. Limbic system retraining, and that includes yoga twice a week. But also, we try to keep him very active. So he exercises a few days a week on top of the yoga. He does weightlifting and some cardio. So that's been really great. And I already spoke about the tech tools, which are the Sense.ai, Brain Tap, the Apollo Neuro has been amazing as well. And as a strategy, not the best, but it's necessary. We had to remove or avoid triggers, which means that, of course, birthday parties or holiday parties are very difficult because of the food and the sugar. But we made it work. And the people that care for him are very open to, changing things to have him over. We also taught him how to breathe slowly, and it's very hard to teach it while the person is anxious. So we try to work on it when he's calm and make it more of a regular exercise, so he gets kind of that muscle memory. So when he's in the middle of an anxiety situation, we can tell him to breathe slowly and it just kicks in. He knows how to do it. We work very hard to have a calm environment. It's not always perfect, but we worked really hard to try to do that. And the whole family signed up to work on their nervous system regulation. It's also everything that I've talked about right now, what it did to us, and I'm hoping that you will be able to do the same, is to troubleshoot the root cause every time, which means that when someone is anxious, the first question shouldn't necessarily be, hey, what happened? Of course, again, if something really bad happens, you should be anxious. It's completely normal. But if someone is anxious out of the blue or in a controlled environment, in a calm environment, then it's important to troubleshoot the root cause. Was it a food? Was it an environmental trigger? What is happening, and try to understand what's happening. It's not easy at all. And it's very helpful to keep a log of things, because sometimes by keeping a log, the root cause will become very obvious. It's important to also have a toolkit. And in my case, I have 2 toolkits, right? I have the ongoing tools that I use for his anxiety, but I also have the ones for extreme situations, right? And the extreme situations are the oxytocin spray, the Selenk injections, which again for him subcutaneous work more than nasal. And even if I give them to him every day, if he's in the middle of an anxiety attack, I will give him extra oxytocin, extra Selenk, and the peace serum as well has been very, very helpful right then. Very, very cold drinks or ice cubes also really help him. It literally cools him down. So that really works for Jimmy. And then some extra DHHB has been amazing. In the past, it was the Livium, which I'll post in the show notes, which is basically a huge amount of chamomile. And the vagus nerve stimulation, the Apollo, I would put it on his wrist right then and then put it on the Calm program. And it really helps calm him down. And if we're able to catch him before it's completely out of control, then we remind him of the breath work, and that helps also tremendously. Now, long-term protocols are looking into root causes, right? And the beginning of all of this should be addressing mast cell activation syndrome and histamine reactions, allergies. It's really important to have a functional doctor that would help you investigate the root causes. It's not easy. It's hard. It's a lot of work, but unfortunately, it's the only path. By starting, and it would start by collecting data and getting information, and then troubleshooting and trying things and then changing things and testing again. So, for example, Jimmy's Graves' diagnosis, he's 21. It took me so long to figure that out. I should have figured it out earlier, but we never looked really into his thyroid. And that's why it's important from the very beginning with a functional practitioner to look into these very important systems in the body to test them. And a diagnosis is helpful because then you can start working on the cure, basically. Strength training also has been unbelievable. We've instituted that a while ago, and that has been absolutely amazing. Nervous system retraining. Unfortunately, what happened to me was also very eye-opening to me when it came to nervous system retraining, as well as the work of Dr. Neil Nathan, which I'll talk about in a separate episode, has been unbelievable in figuring that out, the nervous system retraining. So again, it's a path. It's not silver bullet. It takes work. It takes time, but it's unbelievably useful and effective. Optimizing sleep is also very important. And the only way to really be able to do that is by measuring it somehow. And there's got to be some sort of a wearable or way to measure the sleep. It's got to be optimized. The length of sleep, but also the different phases, and especially the deep sleep, are very, very important. And also correcting nutrient deficiencies, which bring me back again to the functional practitioner. The only way to really know is by testing them, right? A lot of times it's going to be blood work that's going to test these nutrient deficiencies. All right. So now we're coming to the end of this podcast. And what is the point of all of this, right? What is the main message? The main message is that anxiety is not optional to address. It's essential. It's essential. Before you try anything, including teaching concepts or focusing on social skills or independent living, you have to address anxiety because it's completely paralyzing and it makes everything so much harder. And it's so sad, frankly. So it's important to address it, and it's important to look at it with different eyes and shift a little bit the paradigm here. It's most anxiety in autism is physiological, not behavioral. It's the body that is screaming. And regulation and dealing with anxiety will unlock a lot of times better communication, better learning, and better progress, even health-wise, physically. So, and also, caregivers must care for their own nervous system and their own anxiety. It's impossible to remove stress from our environment, but we can control how we react to stress. The show notes will include the tools I talked about, some research, and also Jimmy and my anxiety protocol. I hope that this was helpful to you.